So I've always been interested in paranormal stuff. I've watched ghost shows since I was like 8. My dad's dad passed away when I was young, like 5 or 6. I lived in New York at the time, and he lived in Virginia, so I didn't see him much. This is kind of important. Fast forward to when I was like 10. I had a dream about my grandfather. Him, me, my sister, and younger cousins were at a candy shop. I've never been to one, by the way, which is even weirder. In this dream, my pawpaw was wearing this black leather jacket. I've never seen him in it before. He was always wearing a t-shirt and shirtless because he was always fishing or doing something outdoors. Well, I told my dad about it and he gave me an odd look and said when I visit his mom, I should tell her. A couple months pass and we go to visit her and I told her about it. This woman pulls out a picture of my pawpaw wearing the leather jacket. She told me that she didn't have the jacket anymore and didn't have it after I was born. Weird. My family just saw it as him checking in on me. Maybe it's a coincidence, but it was odd. Fast forward to 2014. My dad passed away in December of that year. I was a senior in high school and dealing with that. One day my best friend and I were just hanging out in my room and my light started flickering. I just replaced the light bulb because every light bulb had blown out around the same time. We lived there for a year and this never happened before. I wasn't freaked though. I tried to mess with my friend and said, "Pawpaw, my dad's dad, quit that." And it didn't. It didn't stop, but I'm still not freaked out. I said, "Opa, my mom's dad, stop messing with us." And it continues. I even flipped the light switch and when it was off, it was still flickering. At this point, I was creeped out. I started yelling Dunbar. I called my dad Dunbar a lot because that was his last name. "Quit that crap." And it stopped. My friend and I looked at each other and dipped out so fast. Another time I was showering at home. It had been a good 6 months since my dad passed away, so it was becoming my normal. I was the only one home when I was showering and just doing my thing. I hear someone holler, "Ninny." I yelled back, "Yeah?" thinking it was my cousin because she let herself into the house all the time and was the only one that called me Ninny, except my dad. I never thought I heard someone say my name, so that was just creepy. Another creepy thing was one day my mom's sister got into a huge fight. Like screaming, yelling. I was terrified. My sister left that night and came back the next morning and apologized. Everyone was gone during the day except for me. I had taken a nap and when I went to go downstairs, the shelf that is super high up was still on the wall, but everything on it was on the bottom of the stairs. I weight checked it. It was still secure. It was weird because literally everything on it was at the very bottom of the stairs. Not everywhere else. I thought that was my dad disapproving in their fight. Something else. My summer before going to college, I was out at night a lot, just hanging out with friends. My mom was cool with it. She just asked that I tell her when I get home she doesn't worry. She was always asleep when I got home, but she still wanted me to tell her. One night, I came home and had barely walked into her room. I stood there for a second debating if I should wake her, and she woke up and said, "Why did you touch my feet?" She's diabetic and her feet have hurt as long as I can remember. I just looked at her confused and said, "What? I just walked in. I wasn't even near your bed." It's funny because my dad used to touch her feet just to tell her when he was home or coming into bed. Also, my mom one night got woken up by a loud noise. Not thinking much, she just went back to sleep. The next morning, my dad's old shoes were at the bottom of the closet. Oddly enough, she wasn't even using her closet. Her clean clothes laundry basket blocked the door, so she hadn't moved anything in there for a while. The final thing. I'm not sure if this is paranormal or not, but it confused me. So I had a dream about my dad after he passed for a while. One night, I dreamt about him. We were going to some concert in my dream, but as I was talking to him, it changed. Like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, but the dream turned into us talking. I was crying in his lap and he was talking to me, and told me that he knew he was dead. At that point, we were in the living room of our house and we had a conversation. Like, he wasn't dead, but he told me that he knew he was and he's okay. Weirdly enough, my sister had a similar dream like that around the same time as me. My sophomore year of college, I lived in a double dorm room with 3 of my friends. It was not long into the semester that my roommate and I started to notice weird stuff going on in the suite. One morning we were getting dressed for class, and he asked me, "What were you writing last night?" I had no idea what he meant by that, so I asked what he was talking about, and he said he just woke up in the middle of the night and heard the sound of a pencil writing on paper, coming from my desk, which was right next to my bed. I wasn't writing anything in the middle of the night, so I asked him what he saw, and he said he got freaked out because no lights were on, it was 3 a.m., pitch black in the room, and he heard writing coming from my desk, so he thought it was weird and was scared to roll over and look. Weird. A few weeks later, we all stumbled into the room drunk late one night, and I was standing in our suite mate's doorway, talking to one of them, and suddenly a few of his hangers fell down from his closet. We stopped talking and stared at the closet for a bit, then made sure everyone heard it, and that we weren't imagining things, and then left the room for a while because we were freaked out. One weekend I was home, but my roommates lived in a different state, so he was always at school on weekends. And when I came back from home, he told me that he had came back from a friend's room and was in the corner of our room plugging in his Xbox to his TV and turned around and saw a black figure run across the room. He said he dropped everything and grabbed his pillow and blanket and went to sleep on our suite mate's floor until I came back. Another time I was standing on our suite mate's doorway talking to them, and he was facing me chatting, and suddenly his face went completely white and had the look of shock on his face. He was staring past me, so I turned around and didn't see anything. I looked back at him, and he started swearing and said that he saw something crawling on all fours behind me, and it disappeared as soon as I turned around to look. One Sunday morning, we were all laying in our beds hungover, and I was staring at my phone. And suddenly, I saw past my phone the shape of a person walking through our closed door towards me. It was a see-through shape. Not exactly a shadow, almost like it was made of mist. I saw the legs and torso, and when I saw it, I gasped. I scooted back in my bed against the wall. My roommate looked at me and asked what I was doing. I looked at him, then back at the ghost, and it was gone. I explained what I saw, and we both got up and went to a different room. The last big thing that I saw was one time I was sitting at my desk studying. My desk was directly across the room from our bedroom door. I was looking at the screen, and in the reflection of the edge of the screen, I could see my bedroom door and into the living room. I suddenly saw a figure in the living cross my doorway. My friend would always sneak up behind me and scare me, so I thought maybe it was him. And I got up and walked out, but I was the only one in the whole suite. Everyone in the suite noticed that stuff only happened to me, or happened when I was around, with a few exceptions, but I would agree that whatever was in there seemed attracted to me. I would be falling asleep and hear my TV remote slide across my desk, and one time I woke up to the sound of a finger tapping on my desk, and when I rolled over and picked my head up, it stopped but didn't see anything. One time I woke up on a Sunday morning and heard beer bottles and cans sliding around on the living room table, and thought that someone was already awake and cleaning up. And so I got up and walked over to the door, and as soon as I opened the door, the noises stopped, and there wasn't anyone there. Other stuff happened that I didn't include here. Smaller stuff, just like things gone missing, and then me finding them in places I didn't put them. Hearing things move around in other rooms, and hearing the occasional voices. I was never a very big believer in ghosts, but after that year, I definitely know what I saw, and I've tried to think of explanations, but after everything that's happened, it has to be something paranormal. Some people just don't believe me when I tell them these stories. Even ones of the suite mates never saw or heard anything, and was never around when stuff would happen, so he still doesn't believe me. But the three of us that saw and heard stuff, we definitely believe something was going down in our dorm. So this happened about 9 years ago now. It's something that changed me and stays with me still. My second year of university had come to an end. So far, so good. I lived with 6 guys that year. It was a proper party house. One of the guys had told us a few weeks prior that his dad was buying a house close by and was planning to rent it out to students. He wanted us to be the first group. That was great news, but unfortunately we found out that the house would only have enough room for 5 of us. Telling the other guy that he had to find a new living agreement was tough, but if it meant that the party could continue, it was worth it. The partying had taken its toll. We were drinking 4 or 5 nights a week. Our livers hated us about as much as our neighbors. Somewhere in the middle of all this, I had managed to fail my music exam. Still not sure how. 9 years later, I'm a professional musician, and still have no idea how I managed to mess up such an easy paper. I'd been given dates for my reset. I would have to get and train back during my summer holiday. It wasn't an ideal situation, but it did mean that I'd be the first one to live in the new house. I was back for one day and night. I ordered a pizza and watched trash TV. My exam would be at 9 a.m. the next day, so I hadn't touched a drop of alcohol, weed, or anything else. I needed to be clear-headed for this. I didn't want to have to come back during Christmas holidays to take it again. That night, I was in a very strange mood. I was angry at the situation, in hindsight, a little more than I should have been, considering it was my own fault. I went out to the garden for a cigarette before bed. For some reason, I decided to challenge God this night. Looking up the stars as I blew out smoke, I remember thinking over and over, if you're real, show me now. Just like I thought, nothing. I finished my cigarette and went back inside. We had those press-in lights in the hallway. They're supposed to last 5 minutes after you press them. My friend's dad had thought it would be a great way to save on electricity bill. I definitely remember pressing it the whole way. I heard it click as the lights came on. My room was on the 3rd floor, so I walked up the stairs. About halfway up, the lights cut out. I was really puzzled. Had the electronics gone out? What was happening? I decided to get out of my room and try to turn on the lights from there. As I got to the top of the stairs, I saw a big flash of blue light in front of me, followed by the most terrifying and piercing scream straight in my face. I briefly saw the face of a woman in blue. She seemed so angry that I decided not to stick around. I got to my door. It was locked. Each of our doors had security codes. High-tech stuff. As I put in the code, I remember saying a little prayer in my head. Please be right the first time. I often know when people are staring at me. I can feel it. I look up, and there they are. This time I could feel it as if it was piercing me in the back of my head, but there was no way I was looking around. I got it. The door was open. I slammed it shut behind me, turning the lights on, and jumped in my sleeping bag. I pulled it over my head for security, like a child, as if that's what would protect me from whatever the hell that was. It was 1 a.m. I had an exam in 8 hours. Leaving wasn't an option now. I just had to survive this. Just as all these thoughts were going through my head, the light started flickering and swinging gently. I swear I could hear the faint female voice tell me to go to sleep. It took a while, but eventually I did. I called my mom the first thing in the morning to tell her what had happened. She's seen some things herself, so I knew she believed me, even if no one else did. I went to my exam in a daze. I couldn't wait to get to that train home. I could fall asleep safely in my own bed. I must have slept for 12 hours when I got there. I'd earned it. About a month later, it was time for us to move in properly. The guy whose dad owned the place was the first one back with me. We started drinking and decided to go out for the night. After a few more drinks, I told him about what had happened when I was staying there. He asked me to show him where exactly it happened when we got back. As I was showing him, he had this weird look on his face. He told me that he was helping his dad out when they were renovating the place, and that where the blue lady had come from was an old prayer room. The guy they bought the house from was a Sikhi. After some research, I discovered that Sikhis pray and worship often. This must have been a holy place. My antagonistic attitude that night must have been disrespectful, and the scream was probably warranted. Oh, and one more thing. I passed the exam. Okay, so I'm going to try and make this as short as possible, but just bear with me if I ramble. So basically my school is well known for being haunted. I don't want to give away the name because I'm not trying to get kidnapped, but just know there are many books and articles that feature it as one of the most haunted places in my state. So I was getting in the band at my school and we had a concert. Concerts were great and all was good, everything was fine. However, my dad participates in the group and helps fundraise for the band. So normally since he stays afterwards, I have to stay after. So at this concert every year, to fundraise, the band had a silent auction that auctions off various donations people made. So my sister and I are kind of chilling, waiting for my dad to do what he's got to do so we can leave. He was taking forever, so we got bored. I just kind of followed him around. He picked up a box that was going to be used to move something, I guess, and there was a badminton shuttlecock from the gym in the box. My dad handed it to me and told me to go put it where it goes. Since we had been there so long, the gym was already cleaned up and was completely dark and empty. I felt really eerie and weird since I'm used to the lights being on and people being in there. So anyways, in our gym, you have to use the gym doors on one side of the gym and the storage room on the other side. So leading into the storage room, there is a heavy metal door and a garage door, so you can move big things in and out of it. So I ran across the gym to the storage room and put the shuttlecock back. I go to the storage room and shut the doors behind me. So as I go over to the shelf that the box with all the badminton supplies normally is, and the shelf is empty, it wasn't too weird because stuff is constantly getting moved around. So I just kind of walked around the storage room, but mostly just kind of stayed in the corner, looking at all the shelves. All of a sudden, the garage door starts violently rattling and I can hear banging on the other side. I yelled for my sister because I figured she was probably just getting bored and decided to prank me. There was no answer. This is when I started to freak out because my sister laughs at everything, so she would have normally been hysterically laughing. I was so creeped out at this point, I threw the shuttlecock on the ground and booked it out the door. I thought I could hear stomping behind me, and I looked back and I see nothing but 2 glowing red eyes. This may have seemed kind of cheesy or made up, but hold on, let me give you some background. There are 2 ghosts that are known to haunt our school. Agnes, a former principal and founder of the school, and Billy, a former student. Agnes died of natural causes from what I know, and Billy was killed on the train tracks that run near the school parking lot. From previous stories I've heard, and stories told by janitorial staff in the books and articles, Billy was always seen with glowing red eyes, and he was always seen in the gym. Just to be sure it wasn't my sister somehow playing a prank on me, I called her. She was in the copy room on the other side of the school with my dad. I told her everything that happened as I darted across the school to the copy room. To be completely honest, I've had encounters my entire life. For my entire life I've been able to see shadows move around the corners of my eyes or heard people talking that weren't actually there. Only a few times though have I actually seen something straight on. The latest instance happened 2 weeks ago. I was working with someone on a particular job, and I decided to glance in his direction. I saw him at his table, and 2 feet away, there was an old man staring at him. The old man had light brown skin and wispy gray hair. He had on normal glasses, not factory safety glasses like everyone is required to wear, and his face was covered in wrinkles and liver spots and stuff. Old man was frowning at my coworker rather intensely. I glanced back at what I was doing, then I registered in my head that I didn't recognize this man. When I looked back, he was nowhere to be seen. The whole process was 2 seconds at best, and he was nowhere. I made a joke at my coworker about the incredibly fast old man, and my coworker looked at me funny. Apparently there was no old guy frowning at him. I shrugged it off like I always do and went back to work. Yesterday though, that same coworker told me that after I told him about the old man, he started to notice shadows moving in the edges of his vision, and kind of weird stuff happening. I laughed it off until 4 hours later. I looked longingly at the exit like I do sometimes when it's near the end of the shift, and I watched as a large black shape clearly moved behind some machine grates and disappeared. I could see it disappear very clearly. I mentioned it to my coworker that I saw the shadow, and I jokingly called it Big Boy, because of how large the shadow was. Not much later, I felt a very strong pressure hit my arm, and I know for a fact nothing tangible did it. I'm not worried for my own sake, as this stuff is fairly commonplace, but I'm kind of worried if it's happening to my coworker. Because of me. We have discussed the possible origins of Old Man. If he was the guy who died in my coworker's house before he bought it, or if Old Man came from the crematorium across the street. My coworker likes to think that Old Man was the old homeowner who was frowning at him for the decoration changes he's done to the house. So, some little backstory. My house is really old, and the woman who I'm suspecting the ghost is in the story died in my house. My neighbors said she was a very sweet old lady, and always treated any child as if they were her own. So, that's why this story isn't a scary paranormal experience. So, first time I discovered this ghost, I think I was about 8. Anyway, me and my family, me, Mom, and 2 brothers, everyone in the house were downstairs watching a movie in a cozy blanket with hot chocolate. we suddenly heard a thud upstairs. It sounded as if you flung a door into a wall at full force, or kicked it open. We quickly muted the TV and listened. Nothing for a while, but then smaller and more quieter thuds still upstairs, and my mom decided to go investigate, as it could be a burglar, and she told us downstairs. She came back down about 10 minutes later, and she found nothing. Secondly, I was sitting downstairs by myself on my laptop, with the lamp on so I could see partially through the room. I saw the curtain was shaking very angrily, as if someone was just standing there and shaking it. I started to show fear, and it just stopped. I immediately ran upstairs and tried to sleep, but I couldn't because I was absolutely terrified. Lastly, I remember one night I was laying in my bed on my back, and I was blinking and opening my eyes. It looked like a silhouette of a woman with long hair and oval-shaped head. Again, when I showed fear, it abruptly just faded away when I blinked. I can't tell if it was a dream or not, and it felt very real to me. Also, it could have been my mom, because my door was closed and there was no light in the hallway to cause a shadow. The only thing that could have made the light in my room was a small crack in the curtain with moonlight shining through. A few other small occurrences happened, like a pen rolling or something falling over for no reason. And when I show fear, like glaring at the object with my eyes wide open, everything just stops, as if the woman doesn't want to scare me, because, as I said at the start, she treated every child like her own. Growing up, I had night terrors. A lot of them, but there were only 2 times when I actually saw something. First time can possibly be explained by me only just waking up, but I was in bed in my room, had been freezing for the past few nights because my radiator was broken. I began sleeping with my entire body under the covers to keep warm. I was a small kid. I kept a small hole up by my face so I could breathe. I woke up to hear my parents laughing with friends downstairs, but then out of my breathing hole, I see a pair of legs walk into my room and go behind my curtains, so I could only see the legs. I could tell from the height of the legs they belonged to a young girl. My first thought was it was my little sister, looking at something outside my window. I asked her to leave because I'm tired. No response. As a typical 10-year-old me would do, I threatened to get mom and dad. No response. I warned her I'm not kidding. No response. I get up and leave the room. As I go downstairs and get my parents, I realize every door upstairs was wide open. Very uncommon in my house. Everyone shuts their door while they sleep, but I can see into my sister's room. Both of my little sisters are in bed fast asleep. I turn back to my room and the pair of legs are gone. I never clocked until the morning what that could have been. Second time, I was wide awake and alert, so it just can't be explained. My room was still cold from the broken radiator. I could not get warm this night. I was tossing all night and could feel for the life of me to get to sleep. Suddenly, I hear 2 footsteps just stop at my door. No walking up footsteps. I think it's my dad and look up to see a dark figure in the doorway. I can tell it was my dad because he was quite fat at the time. The figure had quite a slender body shape. I don't know what happened in my head to think that this, but my first thought was mannequin. Mom and dad must have left it there, even though that makes no sense whatsoever now. At the time it was my first thought, and I believed it. I went back to tossing and turning. Then I realized neither of my parents had any use for a mannequin, and it was never there before. I look up and it's gone again. Didn't clock until the next morning what it could have been. One other time, me and my little sister are horsing around the house on our own playing tag. She runs to the top of the stairs and I'm running up the stairs. Her room is right by the top and she runs in there and slams the door. Next thing I hear is her screaming so loud, it's just like she's being murdered. It made me panic and I slip back down to the bottom of the stairs. I get back up and run up so fast it's like I'm flying. I thought there was an intruder or something. Her scream stopped just before I get to the door. I burst in and the room is empty. Just my sister standing there facing the door, her hands over her face and all the color drained from her. I asked what happened, thinking that she may have hurt herself, but then she took her hands away from her face and I saw her eyes. She wasn't hurt, she was petrified. I just saw something, she mumbled. I asked her what it was, and she described to me what would scare me too. A girl her age, in dark blue nightgown, and an equally blue skin tone. My sister said when she saw her, she clicked her neck and said hello. Not the scariest thing, but she was only 8 at the time. After she told me this, I just hugged her and said everything was okay. And then I realized the room was freezing, like so cold you could see your breath when you breathed. I told her there was nothing and we left the room. After a few years, we got the extension on the house, so we moved out for a while. Since we came back, nothing out of the ordinary has happened. The little girl never used to scare me too much. She did small other things to mess with us here and there, but never really hurt us. Why would you fear something that isn't going to hurt you? My parents were in constant denial about her, but us kids all knew exactly what was going on. As for the figure, I think it was my granddad. Something about his stance, height, and the clothes I could make out in the darkness. My mom's been visited by a few times, but sadly I haven't again. I'm going to start my story by stating right off the bat that every part of the story is unbelievable, in a weird way, but it's all true. I'm a huge nerd, and I've had weird things happen before this, but this was the most supernatural feeling of them all. I used to love watching Bleach and anime, and wanted to be a soul reaper so bad as a kid, that I picked up and practiced samurai sword fighting from the ages of 10 to this day. Weird, right? While you lived a normal childhood, I learned the way of the blade. I know, but we have to move past it. It gets more unbelievable. Well, I live in a rural area in Minnesota, surrounded by corn and sporadic tree bunches. I had this weird area where I used to train and work out growing up. It was kind of to be alone in my young angst. That resembled those areas where lions hang out, like a line of trees to hang around in a brush field. Well, my training area was a long walk between my old junior high and my neighborhood. It was just off a long country road, very hidden. I should also say that we've had stories of homeless people passing through our neighborhood the past years. So, key takeaways. I'm good with swords, believe me, and I've had what is basically a private forest dojo. So it's the summer after my junior year of high school, and summer is coming to a quick close. The warm days are getting less and less cheerful as the summer comes to a close. I find myself more and more anxious about facing the final high school year, so I sudden urge to blow off some steam late in the afternoon. Since I've been to the dojo less and less as I grew up, I packed up 2 of my swords. I know. Some water bottles and a towel and a long duffel bag, and started hiking to my spot for old time's sake. I should say here that the day was calmly winded and had a magic to it I only noticed after the fact. So I get to my spot and I can tell the sun will be setting soon, so I find a good section near some really tall grass and grains and start to train, meditate, and practice. Some time goes on and I'm deep in my flow. Great workout, I'm having fun, being silly, and I'm pretending I'm Gengsua Tenshoing. By the time I realized it, dusk was setting in, and I was losing daylight by the minute. Here comes the part that's crazy. At the time I lived in Minnesota, near Stillwater, and there are many deer around that area, so many that me and 2 friends even saw 3 jumping through the neighborhood in one group once. I was winding down for my workout as I was out of the corner of my eye. I saw a baby deer jump in the tall grass right to the left of me. Now, please don't call me cruel person. I was a younger man, but out of instinct I gave chase, sprinting right behind it with the intent of slashing its legs with my katana and claiming some victory in my mind. Now, I know how fast baby deer are in the open field, but we are in a gravelly area overgrown with foliage surrounded by small trees, making it hard to beat a line, and I'm very fast. Even today, I have great endurance and cardio. I know. I was right on the thing's tail for a whole of like 8 seconds. I gave chase, and man, this thing maneuvered. I mean, I was never more than just out of slashing distance, but I never actually got a solid look at this thing, chasing it through the taller than me grass as it darted left and right to get away. However, the way it ran was more intelligent feeling than a deer. It outran me in 8 seconds, and I got close to contact before it lost me. In 1 second pause after the chase, yes, literally 1 second, the thought came to my head that this deer I hadn't actually laid eyes on could be more dangerous than I thought. It could have antlers, or that it was the last thing I could before my private moment was interrupted by a grown man's voice. "Hey!" it said angrily. Not a patrolman or farm or anything that walked up on me. It was the deer I was chasing. I immediately thought of the homeless rumor. I rushed and got on the high ground, a bunch of rubble that made a pedestal for me to get above the tall grass. I stood centered in the area of the tall grass enclosed by short, thin trees so that everything behind the tree line was obscured by shadows and darkness. And there I stood shocked, holding 2 samurai swords, in way of what could have happened next. "What the fuck are you doing?" I heard from somewhere else in the tall grass and trees. I looked around but couldn't find the source. "I'm so sorry, man. I thought you were a deer." "And what? Are you supposed to be hunting back here?" I thought I was alone. At this point, I don't know why, but I felt immediate danger, and without thinking, I took a stance, bearing my swords like Arthur Dane, ready to fight Ned Stark. The guy muttered something, and I feel him leave my spot. I don't ever see him actually leave though. It's now officially navy dark blue out, and I'm starting to make my way home, physically and emotionally drained for some reason. I get home, kick off my shoes, and put my stuff away. The end. I told this story this way to set the tone because the whole event had this supernatural feeling that to this day I can't shake. Now you can draw your own conclusions, but if you're asking me, I feel it in my guts that what I interacted with that night was a wandering demon. I call this story my crossroads encounter to put a name on the situation. It's all true, every bit. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you could consider subscribing, I'd be ever in your favor. Also, don't forget to hit that little bell icon, that way you can get notifications every time I upload.